Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Orinda Talks. I'm your host Orinda and today we're talking about the A-Team with Bob Vosseler. The A-Team is an American action-adventure television series that ran on NBC from 1983 to 1987 about former members of a fictional United States Army Special Forces unit. The four members of the team were tried by court-martial for a crime they had not committed. They were convinced and convicted to serve terms in a military prison, but later escaped to Los Angeles and began working as soldiers of fortune while trying to clear their names and avoid capture by law enforcement and military authorities. The series was created by Stephen J. Cannell and Frank Lupo. A future film based on the series was released by the 20th Century Fox in 2010. The A-Team is an episodic show with few overreaching stories, except the characters continue motivating to clear their names with few references to events in the past episodes and a recognizable and steady episode structure. In the description, the ratings drop that occurred during the show's fourth season. Reviewer Goldberg pointed this structure as being a leading cause for the decreasing popularity, because the same basic plot had been used over and over again for the most past four seasons with the same predictable outcome. Similarity reports Adrian Lee called the plot stunningly simple. In the 2000 article for the Express UK newspaper, citing such recurring elements as BA fear of flying and outlandish finales when the team fashioned weapons from household items. The show becomes emblematic of this kind of fit-for-TV warfare due to its description of high-octane combat scenes with lethal weapons, when the participants, with the normal exceptions of General Fulbright, are never killed and rarely seriously injured. See also on-screen violence collection. The A-Team revolves around the four members of a former commando outfit, now mercenaries. Their leader is Lieutenant Colonel John Hannibal Smith, whose plans tend to be unorthodox but effective. Lieutenant Templeton Peck, usually called Face or Faceman, is a smooth-talking conman who serves as the team's appropriator of vehicles and other useful items, as well as the team's second-in-command. The team's pilot is Captain H.M. Howling Mad Murdoch, who has been declared insane and lives in a Veteran Affairs mental institution for the show's first four seasons. Finally, there is the team's strongman, mechanic, and Sergeant First Class Bosco, BA or Bad Attitude Baracus. The team belongs to the 5th Special Forces as seen in the left side shoulder patch on Hannibal's uniform in the episode A Nice Place to Visit. A patch on Hannibal's uniform on the right shoulder is that episode indicated he belongs to the 101st Synth Airborne during a prior combat assignment, but that patch was replaced by the 1st Air Cavalry Division patch in the episode Trial by Fire. The patch worn on the left sleeve, according to uniform wear, is the Army in the current assignment of the person wearing it, and in the episode A Nice Place to Visit shows that the team was assigned to the Special Forces with a TAP Airborne over-the-shoulder patch. Also, their berets in that episode are green and have the tabs of the 5th Special Forces in Vietnam on them. In the episode West Coast Turnout, Hannibal stated they were with the 5th Special Forces Group. Then in the episode Bedtime on the Border, Hannibal refers to his friend as ex-Green Berets. though the name they have adopted come from the A-teams, the nickname stuck. Coined for Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha. These detachments usually consisted of 12 members. Whether the four were considered a detachment of their own or had once had 8 compatriots who were killed in action was never revealed. In the episode A Nice Place to Visit, Ray Brenner is stated to have been a major and part of Hannibal's team in Vietnam. For its first season and the first half of the second season, the team was assisted by reporter Amy Amanda Allen. In the second half of the second season, Allen was replaced by fellow reporter Tonya Baker. The character of Tia, a Vietnam War orphan now living in the United States, was meant to join the team in the 5th season, but she was replaced by Frankie Santana, who served as the team's specialist effect expert. Fellis was added to the opening credits of the 5th season after the 2nd episode. During their adventures, the A-Team was constantly met by opposition from the military police. In the show's first season, the MPs were led by Colonel Francis Lynch, but he was replaced for the 2nd, 3rd, and early 4th season by Colonel Roderick Decker and his aide Captain Crane. Lynch returned from one episode in the show's 3rd season, but was not seen after. Decker was also briefly replaced by the Colonel Briggs in the 3rd season for one episode, when Legault was unavailable by returning shortly after. For the latter portion of the show's 4th season, the team was hunted by General Harlan Bull Fulbright, who would later hire a A-Team to find Tia in the season 4 finale, during which Fulbright was killed. The 5th season introduced General Hunt Stockwell, who, while serving as the team primary anatomist, was also the team boss and joined them on several missions. He was often assisted by Carla. Character traits. Colonel John Hannibal Smith is the brains of the A-Team, the technician and leader of the team, and a cunning master of disguise. His most used disguise is Mr. Lee, the dry cleaner who performs one of the final parts of the client screening process, concluding by telling clients where to go to make direct contact with the A-Team. Smith dresses most often in a tan safari jacket and black leather gloves. He also is constantly seen smoking a cigar. Hannibal carries either a Browning high-power Colt M1911A1 or a Smith & Wesson Model 39 as a sidearm, most often Mexican carried. Which means what exactly? Although he used a holster when on missions, his catchphrase is, "I love it when a plan comes together." He is often said, usually by BA, to be on a jazz, and in his trial of completing a mission. Lieutenant Templeton Faceman Peck is the face of the A-Team, and the master of the pervasive arts. The team scrounger and con artist. He can get virtually anything he sets his mind to, usually exploiting women with sympathy, appeal, and flirtation. He grew up an orphan and is not without integrity, as stated by Murdoch in the episode Family Reunion. He will rip the shirt off his back for you and then scam one for himself. Faceman is also the A-Team accountant. He dresses seriously, often appearing in suits, and can blend in well with the upper class, sometimes scamming luxury apartments for long terms as well as regular visits to exclusive restaurants and invitations to opulent banquets, all on the basis of false identity he invents. Faceman carries a cold lawman MK3 revolver for protection and drives a custom white 1984 Corvette with red trim, which he buys several episodes into the second season. Sergeant Bosco BA, Bad Attitude Baracus, is the muscle for the A-team, able to perform exceptional feats of strength. He is also the team mechanic, master at arms, demolition and weapons specialist. Baracus affects a dislike for Murdoch, calling him a crazy fool. But his true feelings of friendship are revealed when he prevents Murdoch from drowning in his desire to live like a fish. Baracus also has a deep aphilophobia, and the other usually have to trick him and or knock him out to get him on an aircraft. It is very rare that Baracus is awake while flying, and even rarer for him actually to consent to it. When he does, however, he then goes into a catatonic state. Baracus generally wears overalls and leopard or tiger print shirts in the early seasons, and wears a green jumpsuit in the later seasons. He is almost always seen with many gold chains and rings on every finger, and also wears a white lifting belt. Baracus' hairstyle is always in a mohawk-like cut. He drives a customized black GMC van, actually a black and metallic dark grey, with an angled red stripe between, that serves as the team's usual mode of transport. Captain H.M. Howling Mad Murdoch is the team resident pilot and can fly any kind of aircraft with contestable skills. However, due to the helicopter tries in Vietnam, Murdoch appears went insane. He lives in a veteran hospital in the mental wing. Whenever he rest of the team requires a pilot, they have to break him out of the hospital, generally using Faceman to do so. In season 1 till 4, Murdoch has a different imaginary pet, imaginary friend, or often eagle in each episode. When one of his imaginary pets or imaginary friends is killed by an enemy, Murdoch usually snaps and takes revenge, but never kills. Brock is annoyed and aggravated by Murdoch's delusions and usually yells that his imaginary pet, friend, or identity is not real, often making violent threats against Murdoch if he persists. These threats are never carried out, but do have the effect of limiting Murdoch's expressions of his fantasies, perhaps just enough to keep them in check, so that Murdoch can do his job on the team. Many times when Baracus is mad at Murdoch for being crazy, Hannibal will side with Murdoch in sympathy way. Murdoch usually wears a leather flight jacket, a baseball cap, and basketball sneakers. Once he is discharged from the hospital in season 5, Murdoch has a different job each episode. Well, guys, let me introduce you to Bob again. Hello, Bob.
Hello, thank you for having me on today's show.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. So today's subject is the A-Team.
Yeah, one of my favorite shows from the 1980s. I believe it started in 1982. I recall that it started as a mid-season show, and I believe it also followed the Super Bowl that year, and that was always a peak spot. That after the Super Bowl, networks would introduce would introduce a new show or a pilot. It seemed to be a prime time, even though the Super Bowl, you never knew when the Super Bowl would end because of the game. But I believe that's when the A-Team debuted its pilot episode. Might have been 90 minutes long, I'm not sure. And it was an immediate hit. It was, quickly picked up, it continued on as a series, and it was very popular almost immediately. It was just a lot of fun, and
But still is popular.
Yes, yes. The pilot episode featured a different actor who played Face, who would he would be replaced by Dirk Benedict,
Yeah.
who I had the honor of meeting several years ago. And it also featured in the show William Wyndham, who was I believe he was the editor or a fellow reporter for the newspaper or news agency that Melinda Kulo's character of um, Amy Amanda Anderson, whatever her full name was. That's how she got her code name of AAA, because she had three A names. And Ron, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Payola, who was better known as Horshack in Welcome Back, Kotter, and he was in that pilot as well. Um, and it was a cute episode. It was a cute pilot, and it gave enough background. And then they immediately went into the series. The reason why the actor, whose name I don't recall, but he had darker hair, was replaced with Dirk Benedict is he looked very young, and the producers, which was Stephen J. Cannell, who had done many an action series, including the Greatest American Hero, and I believe later he did the series Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas, and that they felt that actor was too young to be a Vietnam vet, and that's what the series was about. Essentially, four Vietnam veterans who had been falsely accused of robbing from the Bank of Hanoi during their term and during their service in Vietnam, and so they were actually wanted by the government. Loved that was incorporated into the opening of the series, and then had the iconic theme song that I hummed just before we went on live. And they added, AAA Melinda to the first season and a half of the show, and it was the formula was essentially that they were um, um, not necessarily mercenaries, but you could hire them to undo, a wrong that was being done that either the police or the government couldn't handle, and they were always helping the little guys, be it a unfair, landlord who's a criminal. It always seems like they were defending those that were being bullied and being criminally targeted, but whether it be on a ranch where people were trying to grab their land, whether there was so many different scenarios, uh, stealing property, it they were always there and would infiltrate, go undercover if it was a fixed election or something like that. I mean, there was so many great episodes, especially in the first several seasons, where you would combine action and some comedy and just the rapport between those four. And
What I always liked about it is that they had those MacGyver style solutions to help people out.
yes, yes, they would always, if they were in a fix, BA's mechanical expertise. BA Baracus, wonderfully played by Mr. T, who of course was the muscle of the foursome, but was also a mechanical genius, and as were the others. And they would always, if they were trapped in a warehouse or something like that, they would come up with some kind of, they'd put metal on top of a tractor or something crazy and just burst out of there. And and even though there was so many bullets flying, no one really ever got hit, except in one or two episodes.
The only
They
who were
tried to
being
keep.
hit was the already bad guys.
Yeah. And another element that made it so much fun too was that they adopted the theme from kind of The Fugitive, in that they were being, not only were they trying to fight the bad guys of the week, they were also trying to elude their constant pursuer, which in the first season was General Lynch, or Colonel Lynch, and then the next season he was replaced by Colonel Decker, who I preferred, played
Mm.
excellently by Legault, who had the voice. Lance Legault was, it was just in many things in the 1980s and even in the 70s and the 80s and probably into the 90s. He's passed now, but I thought he was a great adversary. Lynch was kind of more of a buffoon, um, and was kind of more of a comedic character. But Lance Legault was definitely, when they introduced him, and I don't know why Lynch was replaced, if it was a particular reason or what. And they did bring Lynch back once in one episode, um, but I always thought Decker was a much more menacing uh, character for them, and it was always fun to watch the hot pursuit of, the military trucks versus the little, BA's black van, and faces Corvette. There was just It was just really a fun show. You didn't have to get too deep into it, but you always, you rooted these guys on, and you always knew they were going to, you know, uh, prevail in the end and stop the bullies. And it is always a winner in syndication. It's on many shows. I believe it's running on the Me TV channel, among many others, probably. And Della Reese played BA's mom. I thought that was cool. And it had a lot of different guest stars over the course of the 5 seasons. And uh, there was some cast changes. Melinda, it's been reported in interviews that George Papard, the lead, Hannibal Smith, didn't want a female on the set. Didn't feel that this was that a woman should be part of the team, um, and was not, well, in his terms, wasn't nasty about it, but was just didn't feel that was what viewers wanted, and that they wanted this to be kind of a guy-centric show where they went out and did their, shoot 'em ups and stuff like that, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that character added a lot. She did like the research, she did some of the stuff, and she wasn't being pursued by the law, so they needed somebody like that as part of the team. Um, but I think midway through the second season, they wrote her out and almost immediately brought in another actress who played Tanya Baker, who was more of a watered down version, and a reporter. Um, and she didn't end up staying long either. I think by the third season, there was an episode where it was almost a takeoff on Indiana Jones, and Barry Van Dyke, Dick Van Dyke's
Yeah.
son, I believe, was the archaeologist, and was part of this story. And by the end of that episode, or it might have been a two-part episode, Tanya Baker ends up engaged to him, and they go off happily ever after. And we never see Tanya Baker again. Um, what we may not remember is that in the end of the fourth season, um, we almost get another female, despite all these objections. We almost get another female character who was going to join the team, and that was Tia Carrera in the finale of that season, which was a really good episode. It kind of broke format in a number of ways. It's when they really focused on their time in Vietnam. And I believe his name was General Wainwright, who had also previously been pursuing the A Team among those. I think he was introduced at least one episode earlier. Um, kind of comes to the A Team, and he is searching for his daughter uh, that he had during Vietnam, and that character, and I'm afraid I don't remember her name, um, was played by Tia Carrera. And by the end of that episode, um, he dies. He's actually killed during the conflict. There's a mystery about him and what happened there, and there's flashbacks to that time in Vietnam, and it was definitely a slightly different tone to the show, but I thought it was great. And they end up leaving Vietnam with her, with the idea that she would probably be sticking around and being part of the team. But from my understanding, what happened was that Tia Carrera was doing a soap opera at the time. I don't know if it was Days of Our Lives or whatever, um, on whatever network. If it was Days of Our Lives, I think it was NBC, and that's the same network that the A Team was on. And they wouldn't let her out of the contract, so she was not part of the A Team the following season, which when we hit the fifth season, which was an abbreviated season, it was only, I believe, 13 episodes long, unfortunately, because the ratings had dipped. Um, they changed the whole format of the A Team, and they were no longer fugitives. There was a three-part season premiere, a three-episode opening for the fifth season, which introduced new characters of Robert Vaughn, who played General Stockwell, who was a head of a government operation, and a covert government operation. The A Team had been captured, and were facing all save Mad Dog Murdoch, played wonderfully by Dwight Schultz, who I also got
I
to
have
meet.
met him.
He is so cool, and of course
He
he's
is
a Star
cool.
Trek character as well.
Yeah, I
He's a
have
lot of
met Dwight Schultz when he went to a Comic Con in the Netherlands, and he was the first celebrity I ever met.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and of course I also known him as Lieutenant Barclay from Star Trek TNG,
Yeah. Hmm.
and that was one reason why I wanted to meet him. And I went on a picture with him, and he signed it, etc. And but he is so nice. He is so cool and funny, and especially when he. What I always loved about him in the A Team and also as in Star Trek, he plays those roles like I think a lot of especially nerds, but also like uh, regular people can identify with him, and he brings always the fun note into a series or a movie or whatever.
Exactly. He is so relatable. He's kind of the nerdy guy or the crazy guy, but you immediately love the character, whoever he's playing.
Yeah,
And he's really like that in real life. I saw him at a convention as well, and he was very open to questions. I think I talked to him more at the autograph table than I did at than I heard of his presentation. And I had asked him about Tia, and that whole thing, and they said, yeah, there was changes in the writing and all of that, and just the wonderful rapport that he had with BA, um,
that is so
was
funny.
great.
Those two.
They just drove each other crazy, but you knew that they would die to protect each other. And
Yeah,
and the whole thing that BA hated flying, until I believe his mother was in jeopardy, and then he said, we've got to fly. That was the only episode where BA would and they had to knock him out, and he knew they were going to knock him out, and then there was a whole recurring thing of how they would trick him into, getting drugged or whatever, and the burger bags in one episode where he was like, no, I'm not going to eat that one. I'm going to eat yours. And then he's like, no, that's what you'd expect me to do. I'm going to eat this one. And then, of course, that was the drugged one. And then, because they had to get to wherever they were going.
Mm.
Um, and it was just such a fun show. Um, but with going back to the fifth season, which definitely changed the format a bit, Robert Vaughn I thought he was a great addition. There was an actress who played Carla, the blonde secretary, but she was much more than that. She was sort of the right-hand person. And then they had the actor who played Dishpan, who I thought was a great addition to the team as well. And he was a special effects person on movies, because remember, Hannibal would freelance at times and do like Gatorzilla or some kind of ongoing monster character, which in the opening of the series you would see him, in this kind of reptile alligator suit thing, and because he was playing a stuntman, or rather he would work as a stuntman on these awful movies as a means to make money. So and of course the funny part of the opening had Face looking over as, because this was also filmed by Universal, which also owned Battlestar Galactica, had the Cylon walking by and Benedict looking over like,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it had a lot of tongue-in-cheek moments, and you didn't really take it too seriously, but at the same time, it was just so much fun.
It
And
was, yeah.
between the car chases and the occasional little romances and stuff like that. Um, but from what I understand, George Papard, as much as he was the star, was difficult to deal with. Like he did. They did go to some foreign country, and I forget where they went. And he thought it was supposed to be, he was just him, and then he found out that Dirk and Mr. T and the rest were going, and then he didn't want to go. I don't understand that, and I don't want to disparage George Papard, because I really liked George Papard's portrayal. Another point of irony in that is that George Papard, we almost didn't have George Papard for the A Team. George Papard had auditioned for the role of Blake Carrington prior to this in Dynasty, and probably he was favored to get that role over even John Forsythe. If John Forsythe had gone for it, I don't recall the details, but what I had heard is that he showed up at the audition drunk, and Aaron Spelling, produced that, and then the people over at Dynasty didn't want that, so he didn't get that part, and it did go to John Forsythe. And he cleaned up his act, and clearly got the role in the A Team, and I think it was all meant to happen, because I can't see the other way around. I can't see John Forsythe playing Hannibal Smith, but not that would have happened. But I'm just saying, it's amazing how things are cast and stuff. And Mr. T had just come off of Rocky 3, playing Rocky's nemesis, and how he had become such a wonderful good guy in the A Team. But really, what I remember most, or remember a lot from as far as that fifth season, is that the show ended without a really proper finale.
Yeah.
Now they had hinted that they would get that pardon, because that's what happened. They ended up, instead of hiring themselves out, they were still on the run, but really that really wasn't focused on anymore. They were sent on these more spy-like missions, and they were working for General Stockwell secretly, as covert operatives. But they weren't really always happy there because they were kind of under his control, and of course the A Team didn't want to be under anybody's control. And I remember the final episode, which had Howling Mad Murdoch wearing special T-shirts in almost every other scene where you would see things like him wearing a T-shirt saying "Fini," or ending or something like
Yeah,
that. It
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
yeah, it was done, and you're assuming that in another mission or so they're just going to get their pardon finally. But really, I thought NBC did a disservice by one, cutting the number of episodes. I guess the ratings did go down, but it wasn't down to the point where they couldn't have done some kind of special 2-hour episode, or even if they didn't realize it was going to be canceled. For NBC, it had been such a ratings blockbuster for NBC that it just seemed like there should have been some kind of special ending for that show, and finally give them that pardon. And personally, I think there was enough there that they should have, finished the show and spun off at least
With a bang.
BA, BA and maybe Howling Mad Murdoch, because there was plenty to do with BA. As his side story was that he worked at kind of a children's shelter or something like that, where he helped out kids and things like that. Face, of course, was the con man. Would always have some kind of scam going on, and that was part of his skill as a member of the A Team. And Howling Mad Murdoch would finally get out of the mental institution because they had to break him out in almost every episode. So, that was always part of the formula up until the 5th season, when he was just part of they had just broken him out. But it was a good show. And then, they did have the big screen movie years later, which Dirk Benedict and Dwight Schultz appeared in as cameos, which was good. Mr. T refused to do that for whatever reason, and I thought that movie captured the flavor somewhat, as much as it could without the original cast. Liam Neeson playing Hannibal Smith, I thought, was an interesting choice. The other characters, cast members, I thought were fairly adequate to the role, but nothing could compete with the original flavor of the show, which is usually always the situation. And,
Yeah, I had the same feeling about that. That is one of the reasons I didn't see it yet, and it's kind of also like me being also like an 1890s kid, that I say, okay, I am staying true to the series and the original cast than watching a movie that I was, because I don't know, I had the feeling, okay, this will not be a blockbuster that it would be, because it is, well, like different
yeah,
actors, but
they had to
also like,
update it. They had to update it. They had to, and they modified certain characters. The Lynch character was a totally different kind of person. They did add a different female character. I don't believe that was a reinvented version of AAA, but I think she had a different name, and she was in the military. And then they linked her up with Face. And of course it
naturally.
was, yeah, yeah. It was you never can there's certain shows you just can't recreate. And sometimes with the big screen reboots or remakes, they go a totally different direction, and they try to make it comical, which really is bad. Like Dark Shadows, when they brought Dark Shadows back as a movie, and made it more campy. The movie Chips, Jump Street, they never do well at the box office, because it basically makes fun of what we enjoyed, in our younger years, or when we first were introduced to the show. Um, the A Team doesn't really age that much when you watch the reruns. I mean, we may, it's clearly, you clearly see that it was done in the 80s, but at the same time, the themes and the whole thing of fighting the bullies, and I'll go back to that again, and criminals. Um, there was also an episode with John Saxon, which was a clear takeoff of the Jonestown tragedy, which was pretty, that was a very serious subject, and the way that they approached it still worked. Um, you know, it was called Jamestown. It was very loosely, ripped off, but they
Mm.
did an excellent episode. And John Saxon is just, he's great. He was great in everything that he ever did, personally. And they did have another I think it was the second season opening, where they went to Mexico, I believe, and they had like a Mexican cartel, and um, and the daughter, I think there was a love interest between the daughter and either Hannibal or Face, and it was, even though he was the bad guy, there was some kind of comic moments there. Um, by the time, because they ended up fighting another bad guy, then they had to team up with the A Team. So there was a lot of good, um, stories. I thought, lightweight stories, but stories, good entertaining stories nonetheless. And I still have many fond memories. And even though I was in college at the time, later on, just because I'm an action figure collector, I did pick up all the A Team Galoob action figures that they had, and the van and stuff like that. And I'm sure I still have it. But I've always been a big fan of the series, and I had always hoped that they could go back and do, even after George Papard had passed away, I still had hoped that they could just do a straight sequel to it, like a 1 2 hour
Yeah.
movie where maybe now, not so much the pardon, because that time had passed, but maybe, I could have so seen, uh, Face would have gone on to capitalize on the whole thing. He and AAA would have written a book about the A Team. There could have been a whole thing about that, and then leading into somebody that didn't want them to write the book, and it brought them all together, and maybe, obviously not Hannibal, but at that time maybe they could have brought back, Stockwell, who was Robert Vaughn, but of course he's gone now too. And I had always had this thought that somehow they could have brought them back for one more thing, and
Yeah,
you
that
couldn't
would be nice,
recast.
like a big finale of all the whole A Team. Like maybe in a sequel, like bringing them all together and just go to memory lane.
Yeah, yeah. Um, or even, I'm surprised that somebody didn't get the idea of like doing a sequel series, like
Mm.
either a new A Team with the same continuity, and bringing back the three of them for, like introducing a younger group, uh, of mercenaries who would have done kind of the same thing, and but would have captured more of the original formula of hiring themselves out, and with them at least appearing in the pilot with them, and kind of, even if they called it the B Team,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know, but and I think the A Team had its effect on, on television, in that a lot of shows tried to copy that kind of action comic, chemistry, like shows like VIP. I could see that with that followed Baywatch. I could see that there were some elements there, that they had, um, or Renegade, and Stephen J. Cannell really, uh, was a master. I mean, these are the days when you had producers that were solid in what they were able to do with hits, and he was certainly one of them. Bruce Lansbury, uh, um, Aaron Spelling. I'm trying to think of the name, and I should know this, of Larson, and I can't think of his first name. From Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers, name producer people that were able to come up, and the networks had great confidence in their ability to make a show. Although at the time, Greatest American Hero was what was on ABC, and Cannell did that first, and they didn't ABC didn't have that same confidence, and yet, and after Greatest American Hero, which I'm not sure how long that lasted, it had several seasons, but then, he really established himself solidly as a producer. He was always a writer of TV shows, um, but with the A Team, he kind of cemented his success, because that went over big at the time.
So, do you think if they are going to make a sequel series of the A Team now, do you think it will be that good as the original?
Well, one, I would hope that, unlike some of the CW sequels where they, of like Dynasty, and oh my gosh, there's so many reboots and things that they've done, and taking the original characters. I think when with such an iconic show like the A Team, if you were to recast them, and have a new Hannibal, you're going to run into the same problem that you had with the movie. Um, I would rather see, personally, some kind of a sequel series where they pass the baton to, to a new team where they could develop, because I think now we would see a different type of show. We would see a show where you would have similar themes, but they would delve deeper into the characters, which I think is a good thing. That's the one thing that I wish they could have done with the A Team, that we could have. You only saw in a few episodes a few tidbits of their past. Like I mentioned with BA, and we know he had his mom Della Reese, but we didn't really know and too much about Howling Man Murdoch's past. We really didn't know too much about Hannibal Smith, or really even Face. I think we would want to see stuff like that. Um, and I could be wrong. Maybe recasting them, but you'd have to put them in this world now, which is fine, and it would have to be more military activity of service time in this era. And clearly you would have more representation. You would probably finally get a female who was, kicking butt just as much as the rest of them. I'd love to see some kind of sequel show that could, pass the baton to them, and then do the same kind of thing that they were doing, which was, standing up for the little guy. Those that were being oppressed by either criminals or, corrupt politicians, or, and I think that's a theme that certainly resonates right now in this world of people trying to stand up to bad guys and to a bad establishment. So I think it could work. I really do. Add some nice flavor, add some genuine characters, add a little comedy along the way, and action, of course, that would be essential. But I think there's a way to do it. I don't know if they would be gun shy in trying it. No pun intended. doing reboots is difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
How you approach it, and you wonder sometimes some of the shows that you would think would work so well, like the last version of Charlie's Angels on TV, when they brought Charlie's Angels, not the movies so much, but definitely the TV version was so bad because they strayed so far away, that I don't think it lasted more than 3 episodes. You know, it's something. I'm surprised that Dynasty, the new Dynasty, which I tried to get into and just was like, no, this is not my Dynasty, and I just couldn't stick with it. I watched it for a few episodes just to see what they were possibly doing with it, and it was like, no, but it lasted for, I think it's ending now for 5 seasons, and granted, Dynasty is nothing like the A Team, but
Yeah.
and I've heard good things about Walker, but they're not trying to make Walker like Texas Walker, even though there is some loose
Yeah.
connection, or
Yeah.
even Kung Fu. The show Kung Fu has the current show Kung Fu has absolutely nothing to do with the original or even the 1990s sequel, which is fine because I think it stands up wonderful. I mean, I'm a big fan of the new Kung Fu. I don't know what they gained by calling it Kung Fu, because while there is martial arts involved in it, it's a totally different tone to the show than we saw in the David Carradine series. Um, so but then you have shows like SWAT that are very that were remade, and I think it's lasted longer than the original SWAT from the 70s, and they totally changed. They kept the names, but they totally changed the backgrounds and everything of all the characters. Hondo was married with a kid. In this Hondo, Errolson, was not, or I don't know. I didn't see enough episodes to really judge, but remakes get tricky. Magnum PI, um, that didn't last too long. Whereas Hawaii 5 lasted not nearly as long as the original, but it lasted, for I guess 5 years, maybe longer, surprisingly. So I don't know. I'd still love to see them give it a try, but then again, I'm a diehard fan, and I will always watch the reruns and things like that. So
Yeah. Um. So, if you would stand in front of a young teenager now, and you have to tell them about the A Team and convince them to watch. Is there any episodes you would like to recommend, or what would you tell them?
hmm. I tell them overall, that's a very good question. I tell them overall, okay, this is a show that is pre-internet. you know, this, this is not, this was, a product of its time, but it's still a lot of fun. You know, don't expect, story arcs, things that we're now so accustomed to. And I'd have to explain to them, like, there is a connection here and there, but it's episodic. It's there is a lot of action. There's a lot of shooting, but nobody gets hurt generally. And I would just play up the fact that it does still have some themes that are always going to be relevant, and that is good guys versus bad guys, and especially in this world, standing up for the innocent, and for those that are getting um, beyond picked on, getting exploited or victimized, and that's what the A Team did. That they went in, um, even knowing that they wouldn't always collect a fee, that they would go in and they would stop the people that were trying to, exploit them or steal from them or hurt them, in many cases, physically. And that was, that is something that we see in our heroes today, whether they're superheroes or cops or what. Um, and the A Team did this, and they themselves were victims because they were framed for, the crime that they didn't commit. And and they put their lives on the line. I'm talking like they're real people. But I mean, that's what I would tell them, is that give it a try. You might think it's kind of glossy and silly, but really, if you try to get into those old storylines, they really have some relevance to today. You're just not
Yeah.
going to see the internet. You're not going to see, a lot of gratuitous sex or whatever, and things. Um, but you will see, an action-packed, fun show that you can enjoy. I guess that's what I would try to convince them of. And
Okay.
really, it's true. It's true. It
Yeah.
it really is. You know.
Yeah, indeed. Um, I have one last question, and maybe this is a very difficult one, but if you have to rate the A Team series from 1 being very bad to 10 very good, what would be your rating?
I really enjoyed it. And I would have to look at some of the other 1980s shows that we had, like Knight Rider. Like, I would definitely put A Team above Knight Rider. Um,
Yeah,
in that, I liked Knight Rider, don't get me wrong, but I just thought that the A Team was better in that, and it's comparable because Knight Rider and A Team did a lot of similar stuff, and their story structure was very. Um, I know I just realized Glenn Larson. I couldn't think of his first name. Had done that had done Knight Rider and others. I guess I would put the A Team somewhere like on a 7, which I think generally it always hit it didn't always hit its mark, but it generally hit its mark, as far as enjoyment. And I think of my many favorite 80s shows, given the time that it was done and the budgets that they had, and the amount of episodes they produced back then. Like these days, if we were to go back to your other question and we saw an A Team and it was done on the streaming service, we would get less episodes, but we'd probably get more money per episode. We might get, uh, to be able to do more things, both in content that they couldn't do back then. We probably see more message stories and things like that. But to answer this question, I would put it like 7. I would put it pretty close to the 10. It wasn't always a perfect show, but it was a lot of fun. So I
yeah,
might
I
even give
agree
it
to
a.
that.
It's always, if I should go passing through the channels and come across, MeTV and or whatever, channel it's on that's being syndicated, I will have to stop and at least see which episode it is. Um, and if it's before the opening comes up, then I have to stop and watch it until, it does its opening, whether it's
Yeah,
in the early one where it even says in 1977 or whatever, uh, the, I used to be able to repeat the whole thing. Um, and then it was modified in the second season where they didn't give the year. Uh, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A Team.
yeah.
And hear the gunshots and dun 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 dun. And again, you can't take it too seriously. This is not Shakespeare, or it's not like, But at the same time, this was fun TV.
Yeah, it
This was
was.
must TV, fun TV. How I put it,
Yeah.
at the time.
Well, Bob, thank you very much for joining me again. It was nice talking to you.
You as well. Thank you.
It was very fun to talk about A-Team because also like me, I'm an 80s, 90s child, so I always watch the reruns, and like you, when it's I'm stepping on TV, I always have to look what episode it is, so I can relate to that.
And that's another thing about the A-Team that I still love in shows. They had titles. Now I know, even in Star Trek, on the new Star Trek, I'm a little disappointed in that while the episodes still have titles, they don't have titles on when the show starts. And I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that it was like, and we didn't even get into like say the Something Uncle affair, which was a takeoff of the fact that Robert Vaughn and David McCallum, who was the guest of that particular episode, were from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And and David McCallum played a Russian spy, and and that was the name of that episode, and they specifically did the takeoff on on that with their title. So I miss that in shows. I like that.
I know what you mean. It's just, and I think they also did that differently with like Peter Jackson did that with the Lord of the Rings. That he first did, and then he put the title on. But I know what you mean, and I think a lot of 80s, 90s kids will be always saying, okay, 18 was always one of the coolest series there is. So, well, thank you very much again, and I hope to talk to you soon again.
Yes, I would look forward to it. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. It was a nice nostalgic trip back to the 1980s.
I have that lately. I was thinking, okay, what kind of subjects can I do for my podcast? And then, because at the moment, me and my fiance are watching the whole timeline of the Power Rangers. And I was thinking, okay, I can be nerdy. I can be geeky. 80s, 90s kid. Okay, let's go all back to all those old 80s and 90s series like Baywatch 18. So that was my intention. Dear listeners, thank you for listening, and join me in 2 weeks for a new episode of Orinda Talks. You can listen and subscribe to Orinda Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. If you'd like to comment or talk with me about the episode, you can reach out on the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. The next episode is about the never-ending story. I also like to tell you about my 2 other podcasts called Girls Talking Track and Orinda's book club Smooth Jazz, Tea and Books. Girls Talking Track. Together with my lovely co-host Amanda Hopper, we recap every 2 weeks an episode of Star Trek TNG. All the episodes will be recapping chronically following. We will approach each episode with humor and a feminine look. Girls Talking Track is also to listen or follow and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or on all the other podcast providers. We also have a Facebook group and a YouTube channel. Every 10th episode will be a live streaming, so you can talk live with us about the episode. Orinda's book club, Smooth Jazz, Tea and Books, is a podcast that will discuss books of all genres. You can discuss with me on YouTube the channel or the Facebook group. There will be book reading events with live discussions. Of course, you can also give me recommendations what I can read. My perfect picture while reading a book is in front of the fireplace, loads of tea, and smooth jazz in the background. So join me, read with me, and discuss with me the books we are reading. I will see you in 2 weeks.